All right, you're welcome back. Now it's talk time to the main issue of the day. The United States of America will be going to the polls on Tuesday, November the 8th.
In less than 24 hours
Yes, to decide who will take charge of the affairs of the country for the next 4 years.
Now, this year's election is particularly interesting because of the intrigues and drama, you may say, it has generated since the party primary started. Now, the presidential election of 2016 will be the 58th U.S. presidential election, and it takes place every 4 years.
The election between, of course, it is between Hillary Clinton of the Democratic Party and Donald Trump of the Republican Party, also known as the GOP, the Grand Old Party, and other third-party candidates like Gary Johnson of the Libertarian Party, Jill Stein of the Green Party, Darrell Castle of the Constitution Party, and independent candidates. So many Nigerians will be, really surprised about these other candidates.
Yeah, especially talking about independent candidates.
Yes.
Where you don't have that experience in Nigeria. The law doesn't allow that in Nigeria. But there were calls for independent candidacy anyway.
Absolutely.
All right, now moving on. If elected, Trump will become the oldest president to take office. And if elected, on the other hand, Hillary Clinton will be the first female president of the United States of America. Now, the winner of the election will determine the 45th president and 48th vice president of the U.S., who will be inaugurated on January the 20th, 2017.
But how will the outcome of the election affect Nigeria and her citizens? Of course, that's a question we will try to ask somewhere in between. But let's introduce our guest to you. Joining us, of course, is the Public Affairs Officer of the U.S. Consulate here in Lagos. Darcy Zotter is, of course, she's a career diplomat, if I could put it that way. It's good to have you on the show this morning.
Thank you. I really appreciate you inviting me to come.
This election, so many firsts. Some have described it in different words that I don't want to repeat here.
but one umbrella or one wrap is going to be very historic.
That's true. I would completely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I've been covering elections and have been voting myself for many years, and I would agree. This is unusual, but most of all historic.
All right, now if we have to make comparison between the election now and the past election in recent American history, what is peculiar about the election 2016?
Aside from the things that you mentioned, like the age of the candidates and things like that, the two key components are, one, the fact that Donald Trump is an outsider. This is the first time within recent history that a complete outsider to the political system has made it this far. That's first. The second one, and I would say equally important, is this is the first time we've had a woman candidate for president. So those two factors make it unique.
And for somebody like Donald Trump, who you have described as an outsider, not many people gave him any chance initially. And alas, he emerged the candidate of the Republican Party, of course, with Hillary on the other hand. Now, looking at the campaign and the way it's gone on so far, with all the different issues, the emails on the part of Hillary, and of course all the many negative words that have come out of Donald Trump, he's attacked every institution possible, and yet the gap has really been closing in. What exactly is responsible for this?
According to the polls, what's accounted for this is that there is this significant part of the American people that feel as if their wants, their desires are not being addressed by a more traditional Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party. So if you look at the past two elections where President Obama won, there was this growing sense that these people, the people that Donald Trump, for instance, refers to as the silent majority, that they have been disenfranchised. So he speaks to them. And we have to, I would say we, the royal we here is being the US people, have to acknowledge that he is a credible, legitimate candidate who represents a significant part of the American people.
All right, now let's take it from another perspective, that this election is going to be the first in so many areas. Either way, the pendulum swings by tomorrow. But if we take Hillary, for instance, the first time America is going to have a female candidate to get to that level, is America really ready for a female president?
I would say yes, absolutely. And to that end,
Why?
yes. I actually have 2 children, both in their 30s, so they are sort of that particular demographic that everybody's after. And yesterday I was speaking with my son who's in Ohio, and I asked that question. And he would argue vociferously, yes, we're ready for a woman. And he said that in fact, within Ohio, she's gaining ground among women just because she's a woman. That now there's this sense, hey, I can do it too. So I would say yes, yes we are.
And Ohio, of course, is one of the battleground states. But there has, so many dynamics have been playing out as far as this election is concerned. The issue of trust, that many Americans don't seem to trust Hillary Clinton because she belongs to the establishment, the conservatives and all of that. And Donald Trump, who is an outsider, even the media is now taking a stand as far as he's concerned, actually coming out to say, look, we're supporting Hillary Clinton, not because we're really Hillary's apologist, but Donald Trump may not be the better choice in this situation. What does that really mean when you have media like USA Today, for example?
Right.
You have the Washington Post and all the rest of them actually coming out clearly to say, look, this is where we stand.
This is a good question, and one that I think that the media in general would like to say that they're endorsing a candidate over another will in fact sway voters. But to date, there's no objective reporting that would prove that in fact an endorsement does translate into votes. That said, however, getting the endorsement, for instance, in Arizona, a paper came out, first time in 131 years, endorsed Hillary Clinton. That was a moral victory for her. But on the flip side, you get Donald Trump, who's also gotten some more unusual kind of endorsements. So it's definitely a moral victory, and it's definitely something that both will highlight. Whether it translates into votes, there is no research I've ever seen that could prove that it does.
Okay, but in this, a lot of people have an endearing to some of these big media agencies in the United States, especially looking at it from outside the United States, where you just want to watch some American stations and all of that, and the kind of influence they have on people and the way they think and the way they make resolution. If all these strong media outlets have an endorsement for a candidate, don't you think it's going to trickle down on the way that, okay, fine, I love this media station and it's adopting this candidate, so let me sway that way?
I would say that traditionally you would be right. However, we now know, and this is based on studies I've read, that depending on which cohort you're looking at, different people from different age groups, different sexes, different parts of the United States get their news and media from different sources. So for instance, that cohort I was talking to you about, sort of the 18 to 34-year-olds, we know that they get most of their news via Twitter and Facebook. We know that people like myself, sort of older Americans from the center part of the United States, we have a tendency to look at traditional media, ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. So again, it's become so fractured, the media situation in the United States, that it would be difficult to argue that one has more of an influence than another. And that's what's made, for instance, my job, your job, more difficult.
Yes.
How do we reach our audiences?
Indeed, very good point there. And talking about, the fractured state of the media now, it's not only the media that's been fractured, the whole country is more or less seen as a divided country right now. What do you think will be the first assignment of whoever emerges president in the next, 48 hours? Of course, when he takes over or she takes over power, what would be the first thing they should be doing?
Regardless of who wins.
Yes.
Traditionally, what will happen in the United States is that the loser will concede. And traditionally, that has happened, except for instance, in 2000 when it was a contested election. But other than that, usually that night, even though it's not final, one person will concede, then the winner will accept that, and traditionally the winner will say, we need to bring the country together. Now, I think, and this is what the question I ask my friends and family, all right, how are we going to bring it together? That's a question.
All right, Darcy, we'll come back to this shortly. We're discussing with the Public Affairs Officer of the U.S. Consulate in Lagos, Darcy Zotter, on the U.S. election going on. We'll go on a break now, and we'll come back to continue with the discussion. Stay with us.
All right, you're welcome back, and we're talking with Darcy Zotter, the public affairs person of the Department of
U.S. Consulate.
U.S. Consulate. Yes, we're talking behind the scene here, and very interesting stuff. All right, let's quickly bring you this. U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump refused to say he would accept the outcome of November the 8th U.S. presidential election, leaving open the possibility he would challenge the ultimate outcome.
All right, now in the third and final presidential debate, which the world watched with Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, Trump said he would wait to decide whether the outcome was legitimate. Now, the New York businessman has raised concerns by claiming the election will be rigged against him, and has urged supporters to patrol polling places in inner cities to prevent voter fraud.
And Clinton has struggled to get past concerns about transparency raised over her use of a private email server for work communication while she was Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013. The two presidential rivals had a tough but issues-based exchanges on abortion, gun rights and immigration during the 90-minute showdown, but occasionally reacted angrily.
First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing. The New York Times actually wrote an article about it that they don't even care. It's so dishonest, and they've poisoned the minds of the voters. But unfortunately for them, I think the voters are seeing through it. She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged, because she should never, Chris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
Every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. The FBI conducted a year-long investigation into my emails. They concluded there was no case. He said the FBI was rigged. He lost the Iowa caucus. He lost the Wisconsin primary. He said the Republican primary was rigged against him. Then Trump University gets sued for fraud and racketeering. He claims the court system and the federal judge is rigged against him. There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
This is a mindset. This is how Donald thinks. And it's funny, but it's also really troubling.
All right, those were excerpts from the presidential debate, and these are some of the issues that really influenced the way, the perception people had for either of the presidential candidates, be it Trump or Clinton. But before we go ahead, let's bring in Foladele to give us a reaction of Nigerians on social media towards the U.S. election going on.
Morning, Mike. Good morning, Ngozi. Morning, Darcy.
Buzzing out there.
Oh my goodness, a big day tomorrow, I tell you. And it might seem like, why do we care so much over here in Nigeria? We're miles away. What is our business? But the reality of it is, the United States is such a big country, and it has such an influence on the entire world. So
And you have Nigerian Americans there.
And you have Nigerian Americans there, so we do care. So let's see what some people are saying about the big day tomorrow. Live with Empire says, nobody cares what you will do if real Donald Trump wins the U.S. elections and becomes president of the United States. Focus on the Nigerian president, Buhari, and Nigeria.
Okay.
Adeyemi Yusuf says, why is the U.S. election so important to Nigeria and Nigerians? What's to be gained or lost if Hillary or Donald wins? Big question. Big question.
There's a lot at stake in there.
Yes. Fresh Prince says the US elections and whoever becomes president will definitely affect everybody in the world. Nigeria is not exempted. Duchess says a popular man of God in Nigeria said the US elections will be declared inconclusive. So I'm just here waiting for things to play out.
Wow.
Aditoyan says, I think I'm one of the few people in Nigeria who doesn't care about the US elections. Neither candidate is good in my opinion. Olukayode Bakare says, if the US elections took place in Nigeria, Hillary would win with 90% of total votes. But in the US, people like Trump can actually be president of the United States. Anything can happen, Mike and Ngozi. Anything can happen at this point. Last one here from Edwin Ibuku. He says, and he tweets this at Real Donald Trump, and he says, I'm in Nigeria, but follow the US elections. There are a lot of people like me who believe in you. Just do what you're doing. Darcy, I know Mike and Ngozi might want to take you up on this one later, but I have to ask, I want to know what your predictions are. How do you think this is going to pan out? Someone here says she thinks it's going to be inconclusive according to a man of God.
Right, right.
But how do you
Can't argue there.
Yeah, can't argue there. No. But I mean, from conversations you've had with your kids, you mentioned earlier that your kids are over there in the States, or from friends, or from just what you've been following. What do you think is going to happen?
The expectation is nobody knows. And so, as I mentioned before...
Safe answer.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I have 2 children, I have a sister, they're all in battleground states. And what this has done for them is that it's activated them. So people are really focusing on getting out to vote. So for instance, my daughter, who might be your age, she's 31, she said she got in a big argument with somebody and said, look, I don't care who you vote for, you've got to vote. So I think people your age, younger people, are looking at this election for themselves in particular as being extremely decisive. This is their election, and it really is dependent on people your age to get out and vote.
Indeed.
Right.
So no matter what, just vote.
Yeah,
Just vote. Yeah, my daughter said she was actually going to date this gentleman, evidently, but she was so mad when she found out he hadn't registered to vote that she
And that
told
was
him.
the end of it.
Evidently.
All right,
Fola,
Fola, thank you very much.
You know, like Obama said, don't boo, just vote.
Right.
Now,
Exactly.
you know, when the word rigging came up in this campaign, the whole world was, you know, caught really shocked, you know, for the lack of any other word to use. That word doesn't come up in American elections. How on earth is it possible that in 2016, a candidate will have or not have confidence in the electoral process in such a way that he actually believes it will be skewed against him?
Well,
How are Americans looking at this?
Okay, from the polls, and that's my only source of information here, that from the polls, Americans still do have faith and confidence in the fairness and the accuracy of our elections. They do. And for instance, after these words started being used, our media came out pretty vociferously and was showing that in fact, instances of rigged elections are extremely rare, and given our system of elections, which is done state by state, it would be virtually impossible to rig an election.
Even when you can change your vote as many times, like 3 times, I mean, that was surprising to hear.
Right.
How is it that America makes provision for that kind of
that again is one of the big differences between Nigeria and the United States, that in Nigeria you have a federal level election commission. In the United States we don't. So it's actually broken down state by state, and it even in some states will go down to a local level. So for instance, being able to revote is unusual, and it's only in 18 states.
That you can revote.
Yes.
All right, now let's get into, as at yesterday, some Americans that were interviewed said they were undecided.
Right.
48 hours to a
Right.
major election,
Right.
they were still undecided as to whether it's going to be this or whether it's going to be that. And then you still have a portion of people who have apathy towards it.
Right.
What impact does this have on the system and the process?
that's a huge impact. So apathy and undecided, right now, according to the polls, the undecideds are the people that are going to really make the difference here. And there are a historically high number of undecideds. That's one. The other pot of people are the apathetic people. And that's what I mentioned, looking at my son and daughter, my famous son and daughter. It's that particular age group that both parties are really targeting to get out and vote. My age group, we're all voting.
Now, talk to us about this collegiate system. You know, it does give the impression that the popular vote, or the winner of the election, may not necessarily become the president. How does that work out?
And that's absolutely true, and it's a bit confusing.
It is.
So, for instance, in 2000, that's exactly what happened. Al Gore had the popular vote. George Bush had the Electoral College. So this is, for those of you who are watching this election, you'll see them talking about the number 270. Either Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton must get 270 Electoral College votes to win. So not all states are equal. And that's why you'll see them focusing more on, for instance, Ohio, battleground state, because of its Electoral College votes.
About 500 and something people are
There's 538 Electoral College votes, and that they are given out based on the number of representatives in Congress, senators as well as House of Representatives. So the most is 55 in California, least is 3.
Okay. All right, Darcy, we'll come back to this. Let's go on a break, and then we come back to dwell on the issues here. We have with us Darcy Zotter, the Public Affairs Officer of the United States Consulate in Lagos. We're discussing the U.S. election as it affects the world and as it affects Americans. Stay with us. Oh yes, we'll be following the election, and we have a correspondent in Washington, and she'll be going from place to place, and we'll bring you updates following what's going on. Especially if you've been following us, you know we were there at the time of the presidential debate, and we got settled in the minds of Nigerians, Africans, and other Americans what they think about the outcome of all of this. Now, on this segment, we are discussing with the Public Affairs Officer of the U.S. Consulate in Lagos, Darcy Zotter, and she's been with us. Now, in fact, many countries of the world adopt the American democracy, the way it is run, and then maybe a little tweak here, a little tweak there, just to fit into their local. Now, if we liken that to Nigeria, we adopted the American presidential system in 1979, and since then we've been practicing, here and there, how it goes and all of that. But what lesson do you think Nigeria stands to learn from the American democratic process as it is?
What I would say first, I have to add a caveat. I've only been in Nigeria for 8 weeks. So I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to tell Nigerians. But I have worked in a lot of other countries. So I would say sort of in other countries I've worked, and perhaps Nigerians can learn this as well. But I think the takeaway from US elections is that our institutions trump our personalities. So despite the rancor, despite the rhetoric, I'm fully confident after this election is over, because of our strong democratic institutions, we will come together. And that's what I think that you can learn.
That speaks to the maturity of, the democratic process in a place like the United States. Now, let's look at how this affects Nigeria and Nigerians. In the event that one or the other emerges, whether it's Hillary or Trump, how does that affect Nigerians?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, because as I was explaining, this was one of the reasons I wanted to come here. Because I want Nigerians to know, whether it's Trump or it's Clinton that wins the elections, U.S.-Nigerian elections enjoy strong bipartisan support. So it's really not going to change anything, I would argue, and my assistant secretary would agree. So for instance, if you look at things like the AGOA,
Yes.
That was just renewed in February. If you look for Power Africa, that was just renewed. So there's a lot of programs. We have interests in Nigeria that supersede any kind of political party. So I would argue, and others would agree with me, it's not really going to affect. It won't affect. Forget the not really. It won't affect U.S.
So the fact
Nigerian
that
relations.
Trump has been, saying, all kinds of things about immigration, pushing out those unwanted persons from the U.S., Muslims, and the rest of them, Nigerians have nothing to worry about.
No, they don't. Nigerians have nothing to worry about. Like I was mentioning, that we are a country of institutions. And so we may have different personalities saying different things, but it goes back to the institutions and our legal system that will decide. And one thing that I just kind of want to put in here is the fact that last year, the number of Nigerian students in the U.S. went up by 19%. That's significant because globally it only went up 5%. So you're seeing a significant bump. And one of the things we, the royal we again being the Department of State, what we're hoping to do is to continue with that trend. So we want Nigerians to know that qualified students, we welcome them. We want more Nigerian students there.
All right, let's go back. That's interesting to know anyway. But let's go back to the election now. We saw that there were polarized, semi-polarized issues on race. What impact is that having on the election process?
It doesn't appear to be having much of an impact. That really doesn't seem to be one of the key issues that's deciding voters. But race in the United States is an issue of importance and can't be ignored. But many of us would say that if you look at race relations in the United States, it's been a 400-year process. And so there have been ebbs and flows. And that, some would argue right now we're sort of at a low point. But it's a continuing process. It's better now than it was 10 years ago, but it's probably worse now than it was a year ago. But it's a 400 ongoing year process.
Now, the two candidates, one says stronger together, the other one says we'll make America great again. A number of people are concerned, especially with the Trump rhetoric about, it looks like he wants to, shut America away from the rest of the world. He says he doesn't want to be the policeman of the world anymore.
Right.
Isolationism and all of that. The guest we had earlier did say that it's not possible for you to continue to be a leader if you're not going to have followers.
Right.
Now, if Trump emerged, for example, how do you think that's going to play out with America's leadership role in the world?
I have complete confidence, and I know I said this before, but I really have complete confidence in our institutions and how, if you look historically at the United States, we've gotten different candidates who make, who say kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, the institutions kind of mold you, and Congress molds you about which way you really go.
All right, Darcy Zotter, thank you very much for joining us on TVC
Thank
Breakfast.
You very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.